Hello and welcome back to our first session after our first virtual networking. I really hope you took advantage of the system that we put together for you and you had an opportunity to meet somebody new, connect, look at business opportunities, all of that, because again, we're trying to make this much more than just a Zoom meeting, if you will. So with that being said, our next session I am super excited for. If you don't know this man, you should. His name is Jack McDougle. He's the CEO of the Greater Washington Board of Trade. And him and I met, I think it was a year and a half ago, before our last summit. And he was leading the charge for the Connected DMV. And if you don't know what that initiative is, he'll go through it in a few minutes. Things have changed in terms of leadership, and he'll go through that. But really, that was a Smart Cities initiative for the DC, Maryland, Virginia region. And through that, I got to know what the Greater Washington Board of Trade is doing. And more recently, post-pandemic, they have had multiple conversations with businesses, with real estate developers, with some core stakeholders throughout the region to really understand what is this new normal that the region is facing, business is facing. So over the next 15 minutes, we have Jack. He's going to come right on and share the perspectives from the Greater Washington Board of Trade and from many CEOs and leaders around the region. So Jack?
Great. Hi, everyone, and good afternoon. Seema, thanks for that warm introduction. Yeah, it's been a great opportunity to get to know you and work together on so many different things. And thank you for including me in this really important conversation today. I've been asked to take a quick look at some of the recent trends across the region and then share some of the observations about what we're hearing from companies and organizations and what we might expect in the months ahead. Much of this aligns with some of the comments already made. I was really impressed with some of the work at the CoLab and would agree that much of the recovery and renewal that we'll be experiencing over the next few years will be technology and innovation driven. And so it's going to be fascinating to see how some of that works out. And I'll touch on some of that as we walk through this. Just quickly, at this point, I think we've probably overused every known adjective in the dictionary to describe what's going on. So there's no need to really pile on. But what I will say is that this collision of a global public health crisis, economic retreat, and long overdue effort to remedy social and racial inequities, it really creates an operating environment that none of us was prepared for, with so many unknowns. And with that comes significant challenges, but also really some significant opportunities. What we can say with certainty is that the pandemic ended the longest business expansion on record. And it didn't just end, but it really fell off a cliff. To put this into context, this is something that I found really striking. We recently held a briefing with some folks from McKinsey, and they shared some interesting information and data on the economic impacts. And one of the examples that was used was if you look at air passenger traffic in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks in New York and here, the year-over-year decline in demand from September 2000 to September 2001 was 19%. So after terrorists crashed aircraft into significant buildings, we saw the demand for passenger traffic drop by 20%. So that's pretty significant. Yet when you compare that to what we're experiencing now, the year over year, May 2019 to May 2020, we saw a whopping 90% drop in passenger traffic. And that's consistent with what we saw at BWI, National, and Dulles. The order of magnitude is really, really significant. And while we still see that that's picking up a little bit across our region, many analysts think that it's going to take us several years or even longer to rebound more fully, if we ever really do rebound from that. Earlier, Michael talked about the region's economic portfolio, and we are holding up a bit better than many parts of the country because of our diversity. The federal government, federal contracting, as well as continuing efforts to diversify our economy, especially in various technology sectors. But still, our region's economy isn't as insulated as we might like it to be. And we are following some national trends. And just to get a sense of where we were, just prior to the pandemic, national unemployment was 4.5%, and our region was at 3.3%. And by April, we had jumped nationally to 15% and our region to 10%, almost overnight. It's really remarkable to try to how to get your hands wrapped around that. And we've followed this and we've seen most of this in the headlines. We bottomed out in May, and since we've been tracking up a little bit, so there is some reason, for cautious optimism in how we think about how we move forward. Although I think we may be in for some bumps here as we get into colder weather and flu season here in the fall. But at the end of July, national unemployment dropped to 10.5%, and our region was at 8%. So it was continuing to come down. And in August, the jobs report showed us at a national rate of just 8%. So again, the trends are cautiously positive. Although during that time, we did lose in total 245,000 jobs here in Greater Washington. And as we've seen in our region, some of the industry sectors that were most heavily impacted, leisure and hospitality, education, health services, retail, really were hit hard. And we see that across the board. And job losses were really severe. And then rehiring a lot of those folks is something that's going to take some time. And so we'll have to work through that. And as most of you know, our region is heavily dependent on leisure and hospitality industries, and that will take some time. So technically, our region now finds itself somewhere between phases 2 and 3 of reopening. A variety of guidelines and requirements are in place around those phases, and others are still being developed in how we move forward. But I would kind of describe our current state right now as wait and see. We started all of this sort of with the disbelief phase. I mean, even, me, when people were talking about global pandemic, stay-at-home orders, trying to understand what does this mean, it was really hard to wrap your head around it all and try to figure out what was going on. And then as soon as you did, we kind of entered into this panic phase. So now what do we do? Again, I used the unemployment numbers to show just the speed with which this hit us, and trying to sort through all that was really very, very difficult in those early stages. But I do think now we've started to see things settle a bit, and many companies and organizations are responding, and they're adapting to a lot of the changing circumstances. Again, you can't overstate the negative impacts on so many businesses and workers, but yet many companies are adapting. One example that I think is interesting is Comcast, and you've probably seen this in other areas as well. Prior to the pandemic, they were implementing a 24-month migration plan to a virtual call center platforms. And then as soon as COVID hit, they did it in a matter of days. So that was something that was talked about in the earlier panels too, was the speed of adoption and the speed with which we're now using various technology platforms has accelerated really significantly. And how do we think about that as we move forward and we continue to recover? But there's still many uncertainties. I've been talking with a number of folks across the region. I had a conversation even the other day with Brad Flickinger from CBRE, and there are a number of different questions that keep coming up that I just thought I'd share with you some observations. They touched on this a little bit earlier. What is the future of the office? I think that's still unknown, but there will be office space. I think we've seen, pretty good productivity levels with folks working at home, but I don't think that's sustainable. I don't think it's sustainable from the perspective of the socialization that's really important, how that impacts innovation, how it impacts workflows, how it impacts overall teams and team building. So we will see office space continue to be really important in businesses. But what it looks like will significantly change. And, we touched on that a little bit earlier. What I have seen though, and what I have heard a lot is that most organizations aren't rushing back to the office. A lot of companies and organizations are allowing some people back. I know a number of organizations are using various technologies and apps where if a worker wants to go back into the office, they submit a request through an app, and then the app works through their HR department so they can keep track of things. And, so there's a lot of different interesting approaches that are being used, but not really seeing a lot of just wholesale return to the office place. And so I think that's going to play out quite a bit for the rest of this year. And then folks will start thinking about what they're going to do in the first quarter and the second quarter. In downtown DC and other downtown areas across the region, with regards to retailers and restaurants, I think that's going to be a long-term recovery that's in place there. As far as, small restaurants, lunch business, I think we're looking at probably next year, again, as folks start coming back into the office. With so many schools across the region adopting virtual curriculum and lessons, it's going to be much more difficult still even to bring people back. And so that's just going to take time because there's so many different variables in place. And then also, transportation, another key component to that. Ridership on Metro is significantly down, so they're in a serious revenue crunch. That's problematic. And so, without some federal government support, Metro is going to have to make some really tough decisions around staffing as well as services. And how will that affect the ability for folks to get to and from the office? We certainly don't want to encourage more folks getting into their cars, even before the pandemic. Commute times during rush hour were nearly unbearable in most cases. And so we don't want to see more people getting back into their cars. So we need to ensure that, public transit is up and functioning effectively so that we can do that. But generally, mostly what we hear is hybrids. Folks will start coming back to the office, folks are going to be working at home, and we're going to see a lot of different hybrids as we come out of this and as we recover. So a lot of uncertainty still around what the future holds. I think, in the short term, we still need to work through the various reopening phases. Bringing a vaccine online will change things significantly. But until that happens, I think we're still going to see very much a wait and see and a very cautious approach to how we move forward. One of the things that I know we at the Board of Trade are working on, and Seema mentioned this in her opening, was around our Connected DMV effort. And last year I talked a little bit about Connected DMV, which is a collaboration across the region to deal with large opportunities and challenges. And right now we have an economic renewal task force in place, and which includes 54 leaders from industry, government, academia, and nonprofits. We've been meeting since May, and we'll wrap up this first round by October, and we expect to continue into next year. But let me just relate to you just a handful of the recommendations that are coming out, and we'll formally present these as we wrap up our work in October. But several of these do have implications for commercial real estate. Coordinated contact tracing across the region, a regional data management and protection initiative, particularly now as we see more and more folks going virtual. Looking at regional resilience exercises, particularly around food insecurity in the region, flexible work schedules. That's working with major employers across the region to address some of those earlier issues I raised around ensuring that as we bring people back to work, we can do so in a manner that's consistent with transit capacity and other constraints that we're seeing. A regional cybersecurity initiative, again, as more and more people are online, as we see 5G continue to roll out, and as we begin to see more and more of the Internet of Things, cybersecurity is going to expand exponentially in its importance and how we as a region are going to deal with that. Looking at a regional economic development strategy, Victor earlier when he was talking about economic development, thinking about, what are some of the things regionally that we need to do in order to recover more quickly and get more people back to work. Connectivity for all, something that we've talked about for a long time, but especially now. Not only does everyone need to have access to the internet, but they all need to have the devices and the know-how to make the internet be very effective for them. Another initiative that we're undertaking too is a pandemic prevention and biodefense initiative, where this region would become a hub for pandemic research from both a policy perspective as well as a health perspective, building on some of the capacity that we have in Montgomery County around biohealth. And then another one that's that's kind of interesting is safe environments, and we're identifying a handful of test beds across the region right now where we can deploy new technologies, everything from HVAC and HEPA systems to UV lighting and a whole host of other things, surfaces and various materials that would allow us to implement biodefense systems and things like that, both in private and public spaces. So that's sort of a quick run through. I think I'm a little bit out of time here, but let me stop there. Seema, I really wanted to thank you for this opportunity If there is a second for question, I'm happy to take those, but I would leave that up to you.
I think, you know, one of the things that I would love to ask you, Jack, is there's a lot of great things you guys are working on. So how, you know, can this community learn more? Because each one of those initiatives, I feel like we could have dug down in, especially the last like 6 that you shared, right?
Yes.
How do we learn more?
Well, I struggle with that every day, trying to wrap our head around that. They're all critical. They're all really necessary. We've got great teams in place. Reach out to me. Follow up. One of the things that we're doing right now is we are organizing a process around each one of those recommendations for an implementation strategy. Okay. And basically where that's going to start is we're going to appoint a steering committee for each one and a working group for each one. So there'll be a lot of opportunities for people across the region to get involved in these. And that's one of the things that we wanted to do, because it's got to be regional in its approach. And the more people that are engaged, the better chance we're going to have at success. So reach out to us and we can certainly get into a conversation about those things.
That's perfect, because a lot of what you guys do is you bring the right stakeholders together to have the right conversations to take action. So it's very similar in terms of mission for the CRE Connect Summit. You're connecting dots in the same way that we are trying to. So appreciate your time, Jack. Thank you for that great update. There's a lot going on in your world, and I want to continue to bring this community in the know.
Great. Sorry I didn't have a chance to get the question. If you want to send me the other questions, I'd be happy to respond to people offline.
Sure. I will send them to you. I'll get my team for sure. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.